Today we're comparing a pair of electric small SUVs, and we're doing so in a suburban environment. One in which both of these vehicles should excel in their compact dimensions, fairly short range, 300-ish Ks for the Lexus and about 400 Ks for the Volvo. And we're going to be seeing how well they do, because in theory, although they may be perfect for this environment, we found in the past that electric cars can struggle, especially with the chopped up roads we find around Sydney's inner west, with concrete expansion joints, spoon drains and nasty speed humps to catch these cars' chassis out. So that's going to be a real test. Of course, we're also going to be delving into the interiors, seeing which one feels more premium, which one moves the game on, more technologically advanced, and of course we're going to be talking about the running costs of these electric small SUVs to see which one's more efficient and which one's going to work better for you in the real world. So stay tuned for all that, and of course I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on this comparison between these two vehicles, which are about 80 grand before on-road costs here in Australia. Let me know your thoughts, and while you're down there leaving a comment, why not subscribe if you haven't done so already. So let's kick off with the cool Scandinavian competitor, the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pure Electric. This is the electric version of the Volvo XC40. Like the Lexus, this vehicle shares its underpinnings with its regular combustion engine variant, but the CMA2 underpinnings, shared with the Polestar 2 as well, were designed from the outset to be compatible with electric vehicles. The headline specs are about 418 kilometers of WLTP range, and this twin motor variant is pretty quick for a small SUV, packing 300 kilowatts of power from its twin motors, 660 newton meters of torque, and a 0 to 100 km/h sprint of 4.9 seconds. Price-wise, it's $76,990 before on-road costs here in New South Wales, and unfortunately that means that in no state in Australia does this vehicle qualify for any rebates, so something like a Tesla Model 3 base model or perhaps a Polestar 2 short-range single motor will qualify for those rebates. But anyway, we're really concentrating on these two small SUVs, and I actually happen to really love the way this Volvo looks. They've been quite bold with the design. It's blocky, it's cool, it's very Scandinavian, and I think it's a little bit more successful than that Lexus, which I'll show you around just now, because unlike the XC40, this UX300e looks a lot like its petrol counterparts. It doesn't have that blanked off grille to give it away as an electric vehicle. There's just a couple of different design changes, including around the grille, though it's not quite as obvious. You've also got electric badging down the side. Now this UX is a little bit more expensive in sports luxury trim than the Volvo. It's $81,000, but as we'll get to in the running costs, it does have its own set of benefits, including free installation of a wall charger and free ChargeFox charging network use for the first 3 years. It also has about 300 Ks of range, so it's definitely a shorter range EV than the Volvo, but it weighs a little bit less, so maybe it'll ride better. Now, both of these SUVs are pretty practical. Even though they're small, they fit a lot of boot space in, but I happen to think the Volvo takes the cake in terms of looks. It's simple, it's minimal, and I just love the design of this rear wiper. I can't exactly say why. It just has this really nice, light, elegant, Swedish way in which it's designed that looks fantastic. Opening the standard power tailgate of the XC40, and we get 418 litres of boot space, which is a little bit short on the petrol car, which gets about 460 litres, but it does claw back a little bit in terms of also having a front boot, which is about 31 litres of space. And on the whole, the XC40 is really nicely finished. There's no spare tyre back here, but it does have plenty of space for the charging cable. And as I said before, very nicely finished, classic Scandinavian. Of course, we've got a ski port pass-through as well as a rear armrest in this thing. Let's jump over to the UX300e. Even though the UX is quite a lot smaller, it actually manages to pack in a fair bit of practicality. Opening up the standard power tailgate of the UX300e, we find a pretty respectable 414 litres of space. Very similar storage to the back of the XC40, despite this car being quite a lot physically smaller, more like a CX30 in size rather than a BMW X1 or Audi Q3. And then you've got a little lift-up panel here. Again, same story as the Volvo. There's not really any storage space for a spare tyre, so there isn't one, but there is a good spot for the charging cable, and you get a little tyre repair kit back there. Again, very nicely finished, quality that you would expect from both Lexus and Volvo in terms of boot finish quality. It's not immediately obvious that this is the electric version of the UX, which may really suit some people. The only real telltale signs are the slightly different shift pattern and the slightly different gauge cluster and this different material up here on the dash. But ultimately it feels just like a Lexus UX, which is no bad thing. The materials are sumptuous, and as you can see, we've got this sort of Werther's original tan color interior leather. You can go for other options, including white or straight black as well, if you want to be a little bit more toned down. And the options are going to change for 2022. When the new year model comes out later this year, which will replace this car's 10.25 inch non-touchscreen display up there that you have to interact with this kind of annoying touchpad down here, with a 12.3-inch touchscreen that uses the same technology as the new Lexus NX, which should be a little bit more slick to interact with, so we can't really mark this car down too much. It does have wired phone mirroring though, which can't be said for the Volvo XC40, which uses its own Android software. The build quality in this car is also astounding. It feels really hewn from solid, and you get lovely touches like an electrically adjustable steering column and seats that are very electrically adjustable, heated and ventilated as well, which is great to see in a hot country like Australia. The UX feels more hatchback, more a replacement for a CT200 than a full-blown small SUV. That may be a great thing, and it may prove to be fantastic when we drive it out on the road, but unfortunately in the back seat that's not a good thing, because behind my driving position at 6'2", I have no knee room, almost no toe room, which is a little bit strange and reflects the fact that this floor is a little bit higher to house the batteries underneath it, but at least my headroom is pretty decent under this lovely light headliner. We've also got a portal sunroof in front of me, and the materials are generally good, though up on the door here it's quite scratchy, though that's kind of offset by this lovely leather back here and the fact that you have heated outboard rear seats. The Lexus and this Volvo are both based on converted versions of the ICE platforms of their other name bearers. However, in this Volvo, it seems much less apparent. The technology package is really slick, 9-inch portrait-oriented touchscreen, just like you'd see on your phone. It runs an Android software, which links beautifully with Google Maps that you can see in its digital drives display, and it all feels really kind of futuristic after the Lexus, which feels a little bit stuck in the past with its buttons. That's not to say it's always super easy to interact with the climate controls buried in the menus and that sort of thing, but the ability to have Spotify and Google Maps all linked right in here is really good, though I will add there's no wireless Apple CarPlay, but again, as I said, everything's in here already, so it actually worked quite well. The design as well really complements the outside, lovely dials, lovely vents, and you've also got a really nice, strong and powerful Harman Kardon stereo in here, 13 speakers, and even though that Mark Levinson's really good, this one is better. Finally, we come to the seats, which again are a little bit better than the Lexus in my opinion. They're a little bit firmer and more supportive, though the Lexuses are a little bit more soft and sumptuous. So that's going to be a little bit of a personal preference thing. But yeah, on the whole, the practicalities and the futuristic tech of this Volvo XC40 means that I think it takes the edge for me over the Lexus. Meanwhile, in the back, we really get to enjoy the panoramic glass sunroof here in the XC40. I've got plenty of headroom, certainly more than I'd have in a Polestar 2. I've also got niceties like heated outboard seats, owing to this car's Scandinavian heritage. You've also got heated front seats and a heated steering wheel, lovely for cold days. This nice leather upholstery continues back here, and I've got plenty of space, good room behind my own driving position for my knees, plenty of toe room, and as I mentioned at the top, decent headroom as well. And add to that, I've got a great view out. This really is an SUV that's small, but one that fits a family really nicely. Now, of course, the XC40 Recharge has a fair bit more range, owing to the fact that it has a larger 75 kilowatt-hour usable lithium-ion battery. That gives it a WLTP range claim of 418 kilometers. That relies on you getting 18 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometers in terms of efficiency, and that's exactly what we got in our Suburban test, though I do know that this vehicle and its Polestar 2 relation seems to be a little bit thirstier on energy consumption when you get them up to speed, and realistically, you're probably going to be getting around 20 to 21 kilowatt-hours per 100 Ks if you're taking in highway and motorway driving as well. Charging can also be done at a faster rate for the XC40 at 150 kilowatts maximum DC fast charge, which is pretty respectable, though isn't up there with 800 volt architecture vehicles such as the Hyundai Ioniq 5, another great competitor that we may have included in a 3-car comparison, and also the Kia EV6. Servicing is included for the first 3 years or 100,000 kilometers of XC40 ownership, which is pretty nice to know. Also, the median budget direct customer over the last 12 months paid $1,070 to comprehensively insure their new Volvo XC40. Now, your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your age, where you live, and whether or not you garage the vehicle. The combined WLTP range claim for the UX300e is 315 kilometers from its 45 kilowatt-hour usable lithium-ion battery. That relies on you getting 14.3 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometers in overall efficiency. Now, we didn't quite manage to hit that in our urban testing. We ended up with a number of 16.5 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometers, which is still pretty respectable and equates to a real-world range of about 260 kilometers for this little EV. Servicing is still due every 12 months or 15,000 kilometers for Lexus, and each service is capped at $295 for the first 5 years of ownership. Although the Lexus UX300e may not have the best range, one of its greatest aspects is the fact that it comes with 3 years of Lexus Encore Platinum subscription. That means over a 3-year period, 4 times you're allowed to choose from Lexus's range of flagship vehicles. That means the LS, the LX, and also the LC luxury coupe to use for up to 8 days at a time. So if you want to go on a longer road trip or explore somewhere in Australia using a 4-wheel drive or a slinky coupe, you can, even though you may just own a vehicle that can only get about 300 kilometers out of a full charge. I reckon that's pretty cool. Lexus also includes 3 years of free ChargeFox fast charging membership with the purchase of a UX and the installation of a home wall box. Now, speaking of charging, this vehicle can't fast charge as quickly as that Volvo XC40 at only 50 kilowatts DC and only 6.6 kilowatts AC, which means the charging times will be longer if you need to go long distances and you have to stop to charge up on your way. So, driving the Volvo XC40 Recharge twin electric. How is it? Well, it's good and bad, but let's start with the good stuff. So the motors, the twin electric motors, each producing 150 kilowatts, so they're equal front to back, and that gives this car all-wheel drive and a total of 300 kilowatts of power and 660 newton meters of torque. Now that's a fair bit of grunt for a small SUV, and that equates to a 0 to 100 kilometer an hour claimed sprint of 4.9 seconds, which is really rapid, and it does leave the Lexus that we have on test here pretty much flailing in the dust at that car's 7.5 seconds. But unfortunately, all these all-wheel drives are sold out for the moment in Australia, but there is a single motor which has the same or roughly the same outputs as that Lexus on sale at the moment for a couple of $1,000s less than this vehicle. And you get all of the same good stuff with this drivetrain. So for example, the really well calibrated one pedal drive that I've actually really very much come to like in this Volvo product and also other products on this CMA platform that are electric, for example, the Polestar 2, it becomes very natural. You do need to finesse your throttle inputs a little bit, but when you do that, it's very effective and you can legitimately bring this car to a full stop using only the accelerator pedal, and it's quite a fun little challenge to build up that extra charge back in the battery. It's definitely more satisfying to do in this car than the XC40. And of course, it's a whole lot faster. And it's got more range and it's got more battery pack, but it does come at the cost of having a bit more weight. At over 2,100 kilograms, this XC40 is a pretty chunky boy for a small SUV. And that has trade-offs in terms of the ride quality. It doesn't have that bad a body control. In fact, this car's got really good body control for a small SUV, but the trade-off, of course, is that it's a little bit firm around town. Driving around as we are now at low speeds, over speed humps and that sort of thing, it is a little harsh, but it's not too bad over big bumps and speed humps and that sort of thing. It's more those little jiggly bumps, like braking corrugations as you come up to a set of traffic lights, that this car does suffer a little bit on. It's just a little bit constantly fidgety and movey, and that's a little bit of an issue in an urban environment, and I think it really affects backseat passengers. Again, there is another little issue in this car, and I've noticed it in the Polestar 2 as well. There's this boomy resonance that comes through from the rear suspension. It seems to echo through the car a little bit. Not so bad when you've got the great stereo on, and the rest of the NVH suppression is actually really good in this car. You don't hear too much roar from the tires, but it's just that low frequency boom that can be a little unpleasant and a little distracting when you're driving, especially without the stereo on. Finally, let's come to safety. This car has pretty much all the same stuff as the Lexus, so pretty equal on that front. 5-star ANCAP rating from 2018, lacks junction and reverse capability for the AEB, but does have pedestrian and cyclist detection, nicely tuned adaptive cruise control, and a decent lane centering assist, as well as blind spot monitoring. And on the whole, I actually really like the way this Volvo drives. Though it may be a little firm, I think that trade-off comes at the expense of having a better twisty road drive. Now, the UX300e is simple to operate, unlike that Volvo, which has a slightly different starting procedure where you just have to simply pull back on the gear stick and the car starts itself. You have to press a button here. Now, that's going to be a little bit easy to get used to, I think, but the Volvo, once you've got your head around how to start that thing, it just seems so civilized, and getting back into a car where you have to press a button, oh my goodness, imagine. It's like coming from a twist key entry to, you know, a car with keyless access and push start go. It just makes it that little bit easier to get up and going, and I think that's really cool that Volvo and Polestar, and I'm sure other manufacturers will go this way shortly, have thought about this different way of interacting with an electric car, because you don't need to thumb a start button, you just hop in and you go. I know that won't be to everyone's taste, but for me, I think it's really cool. Now onto the rest of the UX, because this vehicle only has a single electric motor, it's mounted at the front, so it's front wheel drive, and it is faster than all of the other UXs on sale in Australia, but that's not really saying much because there's no performance-oriented UX currently sold here. You've got the petrol hybrid, and then you've got the standard petrol vehicle, neither of which are particularly fast. So this car's 7.9 second 0 to 100 km/h time, 150 kilowatts and 300 Newton meters is pretty good, and it stands at head and shoulders above the rest of those cars, but it's not as fast as the Volvo, and it's not supposed to be. The whole vibe of this car actually suits winning this comparison a little bit better. I'm going to say it. It really does feel like an EV designed pretty much exclusively for city use. And for that reason, if you're going to have this car alongside another, petrol guzzling, larger SUV like a new RX or an NX or something like that, it actually makes quite a lot of sense that this is a city car. And that especially comes to the fore when we talk about ride quality of these two vehicles, because this Lexus has every sort of soft facet that the usual UX has. It's something that the Volvo can't quite match. The Volvo is definitely a bit more stiff-legged, whereas this car, even though it's a bit firmer than the petrol electric or the standard petrol UX in my experience, it is still a really serene and comfortable place to be. It doesn't have that low resonant boom into the cabin that the Volvo has either, and it just rounds off bumps that little bit better. That said, the trade-off will be when you get it up to higher speeds, the Lexus doesn't have quite such ironclad body control. This car moves around a little bit more. It can be fun, and this Toyota TNGA-C, or I should say Lexus GAC platform underneath, is one that's really good and adjustable on a good back road, and I think the same will be said for this Lexus, but it doesn't feel quite as confidence inspiring when you tip it into corners as the Volvo. It also doesn't have quite such good visibility. The Volvo really sits you up high. It gives you that commanding SUV driving position, where this Lexus just sits you low in the car, to be honest, and doesn't give you the greatest view out the front, and the rear three-quarter visibility I find to be a little bit compromised, not to mention the fact that although this 360 camera in this vehicle is better than other Toyotas I've experienced, and I'm sure it will be better even still in the update with the larger screens, it's still not quite as crisp or as interactive as that Volvo's 360 cam, which gives you a lot of options and a really crisp readout. That brings me on to safety, where I think the lane keep assist system could do with a little bit better tuning in this Lexus product, and it's the same story for the adaptive cruise control that comes standard in this car. And the slightly overzealous AEB, I had it fire up a couple of times just driving this car around the suburbs, where it thought a parked car was a car that I was going to have a collision with, and that wasn't the case. It didn't apply the brakes, but it did give a sort of uncomfortable warning. So yeah, I think there's a little bit there to work on with the UX, but of course this won't be the flagship Lexus electric vehicle when the RZ450e comes out. This is just an interesting sort of quirky little car that would work quite well as a city EV, and ultimately that's what I'm testing in today's review, so I think it actually gets pretty high marks for exactly what it's intended to do. So, I think it's time for a verdict. Which of these two electric small SUVs is better? Well, let's start by talking about the UX300e. If you need a car that's a second vehicle that can run around the city, be efficient, be very comfortable around town, then the UX300e actually fits into the suburban environment really well. It's small, it's easy to maneuver, and the fact that you also get that free charger installation and the 3 years of Encore Platinum membership are really great. However, I think for me, the Volvo XC40 just has to take the biscuit. It's a better all-round machine, it has more breadth of talent, that over 400 kilometers of range and faster charging just means it's going to be more usable not only in town but also when you need to go on the occasional road trip. But it still doesn't have the quite perfect suspension tune we're really waiting for, and I think in general that's something that EVs over the next few years are going to have to work on, especially around town where both of these vehicles are just a little abrupt and busy in the way they ride. But still, that all-electric drive, really nice tech-filled interior and sense of serenity in the Volvo XC40 means it is the winner of this test. But of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Which would be your pick? Let me know, and if you haven't done so already, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe to the Chasing Cars YouTube channel.